Tanaka creates a shockwave and launches at Haruka, so Haruka raises his hands to defend himself. Before Tanaka left the white room, he saw that there were only trash skills left on the skill board, so even if he doesn't exactly know what skills Haruka has, Tanaka is sure he must be superior to someone like him. Tanaka then uses his magic to conjure and launch several rocks at Haruka, but as Haruka tries to defend himself again, Tanaka uses a tweak skill to hinder his movements, so Haruka is frozen in place for a second and just barely able to dodge out of the way before the rocks could crush him. Even though Haruka can still move, he is a lot slower than normal as a result of Tanaka's skill, and Tanaka intends to take full advantage of Haruka's debuff, so Tanaka begins spawning crystal spikes beneath him. Haruka manages to evade all the spikes by jumping side to side, but he won't be able to keep this up for much longer. Tanaka commends Haruka for surviving this long against him, but before he finishes Haruka off, Tanaka has one question he wants to ask. Tanaka wants to know when Haruka first started suspecting him, and Haruka tells him that he has been suspicious from the very start because there had to have been a reason why Tanaka was sticking around the delinquents back then. Tanaka is impressed that Haruka's instincts were spot on, but now Haruka has a question he wants to ask as well. Haruka wants to know when Tanaka began plotting his despicable plan, and Tanaka proudly states that he has been planning this out from the very beginning. It was a bit of a setback when Tanaka realized that Class Rep had gotten the hijack skill instead of him, but once he got his tweak skill, a skill that allows him to interfere with the movements of others to an extent, Tanaka knew he could still come out on top. He played his cards right. Just then Tanaka uses magic roots to bind Haruka to the ground, and while Haruka is stuck in place, Tanaka launches a massive fireball to burn him to ash. Tanaka believed this would be enough to kill Haruka, but to his surprise Haruka absorbs the magic and emerges unharmed. Haruka wasn't sure that would work when he tried it, but Haruka is glad he got that magic absorbing vine fused into his staff. Now while Tanaka is still frozen in surprise, Haruka goes on the offensive and charges at him. However, just before Haruka could land a decisive blow, Tanaka summons a sword to block it. Sure, Tanaka was surprised that Haruka managed to block his fire magic, but magic isn't his only means of attacking. Tanaka has so many weapons at his disposal that he is having a hard time deciding which weapon he should use to kill Haruka. For fun, Tanaka decides that he will just use them all to tear Haruka to pieces and charges forward to attack. Haruka tries his best to defend himself, but with all the different attack patterns Tanaka is using, Haruka is unable to keep track of him. Eventually, Haruka gets caught off guard and is knocked backwards into some bushes, and by the time he gets up, Tanaka lands a devastating slash that sends Haruka flying across the forest floor. Haruka survives the slash, but he is out of breath and struggling to get back up. Tanaka soon catches up to him and stands over Haruka's body with a smug look on his face, and as much as Haruka doesn't want to admit it, he might be cooked. Tanaka has too many different attack patterns, and on top of that, he has been using a lot of different skills, so Haruka assumes Tanaka must have copied the skills of all their classmates using the copycat skill. Tanaka is surprised that Haruka managed to figure it out so quickly, and since Tanaka had admitted to it, Haruka deduces that Tanaka must be after Class Rep because he wants to copy her hijack skill and use it to steal all the original skills. Once Tanaka has stolen all the overpowered skills, he will become the most overpowered person in this world. Tanaka begins attacking Haruka again with the scythe this time, and Haruka is knocked back by the power of his strike. Haruka won't be able to handle much more of this, so he tries to launch an attack of his own to catch Tanaka off guard, but as Haruka strikes, it turns out that Tanaka just used illusion magic to trick him. After seeing that nothing he does will work against Tanaka, Haruka seemingly gives up and stands still while Tanaka charges at him with a sword, but at the last second, Haruka laughs and dodges the sword while whispering in Tanaka's ear that he's figured out his secret. Tanaka is no longer able to easily land hits on Haruka, and Haruka explains that he was intentionally letting Tanaka unleash all the attacks he had at his disposal, so he could find a weakness. While Tanaka was attacking, Haruka noticed that Tanaka never used the same skill more than thrice for some reason, and from that, Haruka deduced that there must be a limit to how many times Tanaka could use his copied skills, so if he just kept dodging long enough, Tanaka is going to run out of skills he uses. Tanaka is a bit panicky that Haruka was able to figure out his weakness, but Tanaka still believes he can take Haruka down before he runs out of skills. However, as Tanaka tries to strike Haruka, Haruka easily leaps over to Tanaka and counterattacks him. Haruka has gotten used to Tanaka's speed, so no matter how many different skills Tanaka throws at him, Haruka won't be caught off guard anymore. Haruka charges at Tanaka to land a finishing blow while Tanaka is still disoriented, but Haruka is forced to back off when Tanaka suddenly fires a magic beam at him. Even if Haruka knows Tanaka's secret weakness, he is still overpowered, so he shouldn't be underestimated in the slightest. Tanaka is starting to show signs of exhaustion, but Tanaka gets back to his feet and yells that he will never allow himself to lose to the likes of Haruka. Tanaka may be at a disadvantage now, but he still has one trick up his sleeve, so Tanaka starts running around the forest to overwhelm Haruka. Tanaka's movements are so unpredictable that Haruka has a hard time keeping up with him, but by the time Haruka finally figures out what Tanaka is up to, it's already too late, as Tanaka has already cast his death skill on Haruka. Once the skill takes effect, Haruka falls over and Tanaka begins laughing over his body because he has finally triumphed. Tanaka says because of Haruka, he was forced to use up almost all of his saved skills, but it doesn't matter since once Tanaka kills his classmates and claims the hijack skill for himself, he can get as many permanent skills as he wants. Then Tanaka kicks Haruka's head and begins walking away, but as he is leaving, Haruka speaks up and says it's rude to step on someone's head without apologizing. Tanaka can't believe Haruka is still alive because the death skill has a 100% success rate and Haruka is still level 11, but Haruka has a skill that makes him resistant to negative status effects. Also, Haruka rolled double M's when he first got here, so his luck status is maxed out, which is probably why the death effect didn't work on him. Haruka just fell to the ground for dramatic effects since he thought it would be funny. Tanaka doesn't see the humor in any of this and questions how Haruka is even able to move in the first place, since Tanaka used Tweak to restrict his movements from the very start of the fight. Haruka admits that the Tweak skill is really troublesome, and in reality Haruka hasn't been able to move his body at all since Tanaka used that skill on him, but Haruka happens to have a puppet skill, so he has been using that to control his body from the outside this entire time. All the skills Haruka acquired may seem useless on the surface, but in his hands they become insanely powerful. Tanaka refuses to accept that he is losing to someone with nothing but trash skills, so Tanaka begins slashing erratically at Haruka, but Haruka easily parries the slashes away and warns Tanaka that he is going to run out his skills if Tanaka keeps this up. Tanaka refuses to listen and tries hitting Haruka with an overhead slash, but as expected Haruka walks out completely unharmed and tells Tanaka that now his game has come to an end. Tanaka doesn't understand how this could happen to a genius like him since he had perfectly calculated everything to make sure he would come out on top. No matter what, 1 + 1 always adds up to 2, so according to his math, Haruka should never have been able to become this strong. Haruka tells Tanaka that his way of thinking is very naive, because sure, math made sense when they were back on Earth, but the laws of Earth don't apply here. Tanaka has always been a genius when it came to school, so he was constantly bored out of his mind and surrounded by his idiotic classmates. Tanaka wished there was a way to put an end to his boring school life, and his prayers were answered when the class got summoned to this world. As soon as Tanaka saw the skill board, he quickly did some calculations to figure out the most exciting way to live his new life. So Tanaka concluded that he had to kill all his classmates and take their skills for himself. So no matter how psychopathic that may make him sound, Tanaka refuses to let nobody like Haruka get in the way of his plan. Tanaka continues attacking with the rest of his skills, but by now he has to be running low on options, so Haruka thinks he might be able to take advantage of that and finally finish Tanaka off. But just as he is about to land the killing blow, the sword stabs his shoulder from behind, and Tanaka reveals that he can control weapons from a distance as well. While Haruka is bleeding and on his knees, Tanaka begins slashing at him with the sword and claims victory is finally his. But Haruka smacks Tanaka with his staff and knocks him away. Tanaka may have created an elaborate plan to ensure his victory, but that is all he had going for him. Tanaka's copycat skill was overpowered from the start, so he never had to put any effort into learning to adapt as Haruka did, and that is why Tanaka is going to lose. Tanaka desperately tries to stab Haruka with his sword, but Haruka is way ahead of him and takes him out with his gambit skill. With this, Tanaka is fatally wounded and falls over dead, but even though Haruka ends up winning this battle, he is still badly wounded in the process, and all the pain comes rushing back to him the second he relaxes. On top of that, all the skills Haruka used during the fight have left him completely drained, so he is on the verge of passing out. However, just before Haruka hits the ground, he is caught by the nerds. Haruka is glad to see them, but he really wishes they had shown a lot sooner, so they could help him with the fight. They may have missed all the fighting, but they are here to help now. Haruka is grateful for the help, but Haruka wonders how they even knew he was out there. They explain that class rep found them just as they were leaving the dungeon, so she told them all about the fight Haruka was in. They couldn't just stand by and let Haruka handle it all by himself, so they took off ahead into the woods to help him. Eventually they all make it back to the city, and all the girls are out standing by the gate to greet Haruka. They are all really worried about him and say they have a feast prepared in his honor, but all this attention makes Haruka feel awkward. Just then the leader of the jocks comes out to see Haruka, and he doesn't need any words and just high-fives Haruka in celebration of his victory. Now all is done, the girls suggest that they all head back to the inn since the bath is ready and they could all use a good bath, so they drag Haruka off. Meanwhile, the popular girls stay behind and finally apologize to the nerds like they have meant to do. The nerds are surprised by this since they never would have expected these girls to show such humility, but they've come to understand they were wrong for how they treated the nerds, and they appreciate everything they did for the group. It looks like everything has been wrapped up quite nicely, so Haruka believes there is no need for him to stay here any longer, so he starts sneaking away to return to his life in the woods. However, before Haruka could get away, Class Rep spots him and asks where he thinks he is going. Class Rep was so worried that Haruka might end up dead from his fight, and now Haruka is finally back. He is trying to leave again. Haruka apologizes, so Class Rep says it's fine as long as he doesn't try to leave them again, and this time all the girls will be watching him, so there is no way Haruka is getting away from them again. The next day, Haruka wakes up after having a strange dream and heads downstairs where the nerds greet him. From the looks of it, they will head into the dungeon again today, and Haruka is a bit curious since they have been going to the dungeon a lot lately. The nerds admit that there is a particularly rare item they are looking for, and it only drops in the dungeon, which is why they have been so busy lately. Haruka asks nerds what the item does, so they say that it changes others' value of you. They head off on their adventure. While the rare item definitely sounds cool, Haruka has no need for one since he wants to get back to living his life as a loner. Unfortunately, one person is standing in the way of that, and she seems mad for some reason. Haruka freezes in his tracks and asks the class rep why she is mad. Haruka already got yelled at by all the girls yesterday, but the class rep hasn't gotten the chance to personally yell at him yet. Class rep begins yelling at Haruka for doing something so dangerous, not taking her with him, and completely ignoring the fact that class rep was Tanaka's target to begin with. Haruka just apologizes to get this over with and agrees to inform her the next time he plans on risking his life. Class rep seems satisfied after Haruka says this, so she begins walking away, and Haruka is left on the floor, wondering how things got to this point. If Haruka doesn't figure something out soon, he is never going to be able to get back to his loner lifestyle in the woods, but that is when Haruka comes up with an amazing idea. If Haruka hits all the girls with a rare item, they will all like him too much to get mad at him. And if they won't get mad, Haruka is free to leave. With that, Haruka has made up his mind and plans to head into the dungeon today. At the same time, in the Lord's mansion, Marielle is a little worried because her father has been overworking himself recently. Marielle tries to get him to relax with some tea, but he cannot afford to relax just yet, as there have been several sightings of monsters in the area, and it is leading to fallen merchant activities all over the town. So as the Lord, he has to do something about it. Just then, a guard runs into the room and he has really bad news to deliver. A horde of monsters has just appeared near the dungeon. Coincidentally, Haruka happened to run into this horde of monsters. While Haruka wasn't expecting to have it fight anything before getting to the dungeon, he is always up for a quick warm-up. Of course, Marielle has no idea that Haruka is already fighting the monsters, so she rushes over to the guild in a panic and tells the guild master that a huge horde of orcs is heading this way, and if nothing is done it will surely destroy the entire town. Upon hearing this, the entire guild is ready for the action, and since class rep is also there, she offers to help defend the town as well, so class rep rushes off to gather all her classmates, but then when she realizes that Haruka isn't here. As Haruka charges at the horde, he is a bit surprised to see so many of them, and there is even an orc king here too. But it's not like it makes much of a difference to him, since Haruka can still one-shot them all. Back in town, all the adventurers in the city assembled at the gate, expecting to fight for their lives. But all the monsters that were heading their way had already been dispatched, and Haruka had just finished wiping out the Orc King. Now Haruka is done with that, he takes a moment to think, since it is pretty strange that all orcs showed up at once, but at the same time Haruka doesn't really care, so he decides to forget about it and continues heading for the dungeon. Eventually Haruka locates the dungeon and sneaks past the guard to get in without having any interaction. Once Haruka is inside, he is amazed by how detailed the dungeon interior is, but Haruka can't afford to let himself get distracted because he has a very important mission to complete. Haruka begins looking for the rare item, but he doesn't know what it looks like, so Haruka just wanders aimlessly until he comes across a random treasure chest in the middle of the hall. Haruka is really excited and opens it expecting to find some really cool items, but to his dismay, after using his appraisal skill to check their stats, he finds out that everything in the chest is a piece of junk. Haruka keeps going through the dungeon and finds more stuff, but it is all junk as well, so Haruka eventually gives up on trying to find the rare item on his own and decides to ask that weird merchant if he knows anything about it. Once Haruka gets back to town. Back at the town, everyone has been standing at the gate for hours and waiting for the orcs to attack. And they are starting to think Marielle might have been lying, but all of a sudden, they see something coming from the smoke. So they ready their weapons, but it turns out that it is just Haruka, who is sleepy from a long day of adventuring. Haruka has no idea what's going on here, or why everyone looks so tense, so class rep runs up to him and tells him about the horde of monsters that are heading for this town. Class rep also asks him where he has been all this time, but Haruka can exactly tell her that he is looking for a rare item, so Haruka just remains silent. Gatek asks Haruka if he saw any orcs on his way back here, and now that he mentions it, Haruka remembers slaughtering a horde of orcs earlier, and for some reason, everyone is angry at him for it. Both the guild master and Marielle say they are thankful that Haruka defeated the orcs, but they can't approve of him doing something as dangerous as fighting a horde of monsters by himself. The guild master tells him that there have been reports of increased monster activity, including monsters making their way out of the dungeon. So there is a serious possibility that they may experience a dungeon stampede soon. And that is why he wants Haruka to promise that he won't do anything reckless anymore. Once Haruka is back in his room, he thinks about everything that happened today. And now that Haruka has got the guild master and Marielle's attention, it is going to be even harder for him to get out of town without someone nagging him about it. The next day Haruka heads over to the magic item merchant, and the guy is not happy to see Haruka at all after what he did last time, but Haruka assures him that he is not here for magic items today. All Haruka wants to do is to ask a question. Haruka asks where he can find the affinity raising item, and while the merchant doesn't know of any affinity item, he does know about the pheromone ring that boosts your charisma. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing Haruka is looking for, so Haruka asks the merchant where it's located since it's not anywhere on the first floor of the dungeon. The merchant tells him there is no way an item like that would be on the first floor to begin with, because someone would have already picked it up. It must be somewhere around the 50th floor of the dungeon, which no one has ever explored. There are 100 floors in total, but it is not a simple task to descend these floors since you must defeat each floor boss as you go. There is still a lot of stuff that remains unknown about the dungeon, but if Haruka intends to go down there, the merchant tells him that Haruka has to stock up on potions and recovery items, so Haruka runs off to do just that. But all the nerds were listening on Haruka's conversation, and as soon as they learn that Haruka is after the pheromone ring, they immediately go to the class rep to stop Haruka. Once class rep finds out about the pheromone ring, she and the other girls get really worried, because if Haruka ends up with something like that, they like him too much to say no to him. And then Haruka be able to do whatever he wants. No matter what, they have to make sure Haruka doesn't get that ring, so they all set out to stop him. After stocking up on supplies, Haruka was on his way to the dungeon, but all of a sudden, his perception skill alerted him to the presence of several people behind him, so Haruka turned around and found class rep and the entire class following up on him. Haruka stops and asks the class rep what everyone is doing here, but the class rep counters and asks Haruka what he is doing here today. Class rep tells Haruka she knows he is after the pheromone ring, but Haruka denies it and makes up a lie saying he is actually after the Solomon ring, a ring that would allow him to talk to animals, but no one is buying that, and since Haruka is not going to be able to convince them to leave him alone, so he just starts running away. Class rep and the rest of the class follow him into the dungeon, and Haruka may be ahead of them. But if class rep gets the pheromone ring before him, she would be able to force Haruka to obey her rules. And that would be really bad for his loner lifestyle, so Haruka starts sprinting again to create more distance. Class rep calls out to Haruka and says it is dangerous to run in the dungeon since he may fall into a trap, but Haruka says traps won't work on him since his luck stat is maxed out. The traps may not work, but poor construction is another thing entirely, because when Haruka puts his hand on the wall, it collapses, sending him into a near bottomless hole. Class rep tries reaching her hand out to save Haruka, but she is too late and Haruka falls into a deep hole. Haruka has been falling for a long time, and he doesn't know how to save himself. Eventually Haruka catches sight of the bottom of the hole, and that's when he comes up with an idea, so Haruka uses earth magic to turn the ground into a cushion and break his fall. With how long Haruka was falling, Haruka wondered if he somehow ended up on the 100th floor. It looked like there was only one path to follow, but Haruka already knew that tunnel would lead him to the dungeon's final boss, and he didn't want to deal with that, so Haruka starts thinking of ways to get out of here. Haruka recalls that he has the airwalk skill, and decides to use that to get out of here. But unfortunately, with how deep he fell, airwalk won't be able to get him out. Haruka has no choice left to head down the ominous path, but on the bright side, falling into that trap and ending up in an unfamiliar part of the dungeon allowed him to unlock 2 new skills: trap detection and spatial awareness. Haruka uses the skills to scope out the area, and thankfully there are no traps on the way to the boss's room. But Haruka finds something even worse because it looks like he is actually on floor 101, so that means Haruka has to fight the hidden boss, and that is going to be an extra problem. Still, it is not like Haruka has much of a choice in the matter, so he begins making his way through the hall. The mana in the air is so dense that Haruka is having trouble breathing, but eventually Haruka arrives at the boss's room and opens the door. As soon as Haruka does this, a wave of mana rushes toward him, and he comes face to face with the secret boss of the Dungeon Emperor. Haruka knows this is going to be a tough battle, so Haruka uses his appraisal skill to see what he is up against, and to his horror, Haruka discovers that the Dungeon Emperor is level 100. Meanwhile, class rep and the rest of the class have been descending the dungeon in search of Haruka, but they have already reached the 47th floor and there is still no sign of him. The class is worried that he may have fallen to the bottom of the dungeon, but Shimazaki thinks Haruka could just use one of the portals that lead back up to the surface to escape. Unfortunately, Tatsuya explains that the portal only appears after you clear the floor boss, and they don't show at all if you skip the normal path, so there is no chance of Haruka finding one. Everyone knows that Haruka is tough, but the legend of this dungeon says that the Dungeon Emperor lies at the bottom, and even the Dungeon King is nothing compared to the Dungeon Emperor. The girls are starting to worry that they might not prepared well to rescue Haruka, since they don't have the equipment needed for such a deep dungeon dive. But class rep doesn't want to leave him down there, so everyone decides to keep moving forward and make it down as far as they can. Meanwhile, down in the boss room, Haruka is thinking about his options for fighting this thing. Haruka praises it, but he still can't see any of its skills, and the only information that shows up is that this thing is the Immortal King. Haruka knows liches are extremely powerful when it comes to using magic, meaning he can't afford to get into his range of attack, so instead Haruka decides to attack it up close. Haruka gets instantly behind the lich, and Haruka thinks he has the upper hand, but at the last second, the lich counters him with its sword, so this fight isn't going to be as easy as Haruka thought it would be. So now what will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to find out what will happen next. So friends, if you liked our recap video, then please like and share this video and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.